Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Choda and welcome to this brand new update from the Ignition Time channel. My name is Dr. Nitin Choda and my channel is Ignition Time. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the President's sliding scale proposal for unemployment, and I'm actually going to make a bold prediction. Now, I don't normally make predictions because my wife likes to remind me how often I'm wrong, but I'm going to make a prediction here because I think I see what's going on behind the scenes. In this video, I'm going to go over three things. One is the summary of the two plans that are being considered by the Republicans right now. Number two, I'm going to talk to you about how long some of these plans are actually going to take to implement, because we have new data from some important associations, national associations, that suggest that it could take anywhere from 8 weeks to 20 weeks to implement some of these more complicated unemployment benefit extension proposals. And I'll talk to you about the financial and the structural challenges that exist with the state unemployment systems. I'll also answer the question, and by the way, this question was answered by the US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and the Mark Meadows, who is the White House Chief of Staff, and they were asked, what if states cannot make the shift? What if the $200 bonus is not enough? You'll hear what they have to say about that, and I think you're going to be pretty surprised with what they have to say. And finally, I'm going to make a bold prediction at the end of this video. Now, I want you to understand the entire framework before you skip to my prediction. And again, I could be wrong with my prediction, but I'm going to put my neck on the line and make a bold prediction at the end of this video about how all of this is ultimately going to pan out. So let's talk about a summary of the two plans that are now actually being considered by the Republicans. Now, this was actually reported by Jeff Stein, who's a reporter for the Washington Post, and I think he does some phenomenal reporting. I'll link you folks to his Twitter feed down below, and I encourage you to follow his Twitter feed and some really good reporting from Jeff Stein. So he said there are two plans being considered right now by the Republicans. The first is a $200 per week booster instead of the $600 per week booster through the rest of 2020. So in other words, the $600 per week would now be cut down to $200 per week, which would likely be kept throughout 2020. So that was the first plan. And the second plan seems to be something that the US Treasury Secretary has talked about. I've done other videos about that. The President has talked about that, which is essentially a sliding scale. What does that mean? So that would mean that cutting the $600 per week down to $200 per week for several weeks, and then replacing that bonus with an individualized wage replacement based on 70% of a person's prior income. So the GOP has been saying they want 70% wage replacement. In other words, workers would get unemployment benefits that would equate to 70% of what they had been earning prior. In other words, the state benefit, and I have done another video talking about minimum and maximum state benefits, so you want to check that out on the channel. State benefit plus the federal booster would be approximately 70% of a person's prior wages. So what is the underlying plan behind all of this? The underlying plan is the White House wants to end, in fact, the $600 unemployment weekly booster has effectively ended at the time that you're watching this video, and they want to replace them with 70% of a worker's previous wages. So currently, the plan is that the states are actually, with the unemployment benefits, replacing right around 45% of an individual's wages. That's the basic structure of the unemployment system, with a federal bonus of approximately $200 per week, which by the way is way down from the current $600. That's a substantial reduction to go from $600 to $200 per week. That would replace right around 70% of average workers' wages. That's what's being considered. Now, here's the problem, and again, all of this is reported by Jeff Stein. A lot of credit goes to him. I think you should check out his Twitter feed. The problem with the first plan, according to some Republicans, is that flat $200 per week bonus does not reflect differences in prior income. So in other words, with the $200 per week, some individuals would end up still making more than they made with prior wages, because if they were low income earners, then that would still result in a substantial increase above and beyond what they were making prior to these benefits. And number two, that would be substantially lower for some individuals. I mean, if you were making $75,000 a year, the 45% with the state benefit plus $200 per week, it doesn't come close to your 70%. So in other words, they said that this would be fundamentally imbalanced, and the problem, this essentially is a problem with the first plan. Now, the second plan that they have aims to fix this problem. So this is essentially an income disparity problem, and they have a second plan, and the second plan is that have the federal booster, in other words, have the federal government kick in with 50% of the state unemployment insurance amount. So let's say your state unemployment insurance amount was 300, the 50% of that would be 150, so you would get 300 plus 150, and that would get you to approximately 70%. Because think about it, if your fundamental state unemployment wages are unemployment benefits are 45%, half of 45% is 22.5. When you take the 45% and then you add 22.5%, that brings you to right under 70% of the revenue. Now, from a theoretical, from a mathematical standpoint, they have this belief, if you will, but how is this actually going to be implemented? How is this going to be executed? Because states are completely overloaded, states are completely overwhelmed. I just did a video on my channel where I talked about the significant fraud aspects of the unemployment benefits system. A lot of people are having their benefits paused, so states simply aren't even able to keep up with a $600 unemployment booster, let alone a complicated calculation of 70% of a person's prior wages. So now here's the problem with the second plan, according to the US Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia. Now, in case I'm sure my subscribers know this, but Eugene Scalia, the US Labor Secretary, was nominated by President Trump. So you have a very important part of President Trump's administration basically saying, in his exact words, this is basically said is very challenging. States are already having enormous difficulties, and Senator Ron Wyden, who's a ranking Democrat on the Finance Committee, he said that basically Scalia said that it can't be done. Now also, as you know, states are struggling right now. They're getting crushed right now as they try and distribute UI benefits. A lot of my subscribers in the state of Florida, for example, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The same problems exist in other states as well. California, Ohio is having some problems too. So a lot of Democrats and economists, however, are saying that going from $600 down to $200 per week, or 70% of a person's income, would spell disaster for individuals, for the over 20 million plus individuals who are currently on unemployment, and that would be a problem for the broader economy. So overwhelmed state officials will struggle to keep up with this change. There's no doubt about that. Now, let's talk about how long it'll take to implement the financial and the structural issue with these proposed state unemployment benefit changes and the federal unemployment benefit changes going forward. This is not just a financial issue for more than 20 million American families. This is a structural issue for the state unemployment benefit system, because the systems are not geared to be able to provide these kinds of customized benefits. No one planned for this. No one could have predicted this, and it takes weeks to re-engineer those systems. That's number one. Number two, this is also a clear political divide, a clear difference in political ideologies, which is causing a gridlock. In fact, like I mentioned in the video the other day, the Republicans are struggling to see eye to eye with the White House, and then after that they have to go and negotiate with the Democrats. So that is why there is a structural problem and there is a political problem on top of a financial, human, real life problem that we are facing now. The National Association of State Workforce Agencies, they actually released a memo, and this memo, I'll link you to this memo in the description below, so I definitely want you to check it out. They are actually a national organization that represents all 50 workforce agencies, DC and US territories. So they're essentially responsible for all of this stuff. They warned Congress it would take approximately 8 to 20 weeks. Okay, approximately 8 to 20 weeks to transition to a more complex system. So the more complex this gets, the harder it's going to be for this to be actually implemented by the states in the next round of unemployment benefits extension. So I will link you to the memo in the description below. And like I mentioned, Eugene Scalia, the US Labor Secretary, specifically said that, in fact, the Department of Labor specifically said that it's strongly opposed unemployment based on previous wages, because it would be exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, to implement. These are the words from the Department of Labor: exceedingly difficult, if not impossible to implement. Democrats, as you know, are pushing for an extension of the $600 unemployment benefits and argue that reducing or delaying this elevated assistance will have devastating ripple effects on individuals as well as the economy overall. And Republicans have for months, however, warned that the $600 unemployment benefits, which were passed with the CARES Act, will discourage many Americans from going back to work. So a lot of economists have said that they believe that the cut in unemployment would mean millions of individuals will have fewer jobs in the coming year, because it would create more long-term unemployment related problems. Now, here's the interesting thing. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and the White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows did insist last week that the technological challenges will not prevent the rollout of unemployment benefits going forward. So as you can see, there is a consensus that there will be continued unemployment benefits, but there's no clear consensus about how much and how they'll be rolled out. But this is where things get really interesting. As you know, Democrats are pushing for this, And one of the Democrats, again, Senator Ron Wyden, who's a ranking Democrat in the Finance Committee, he specifically said with the outdated technology, it would take states weeks to implement any change to the $600 boost. This would cause significant disruption. The only option that ensures families can pay August rent is extending the $600. Now both Mnuchin and Meadows were asked, what if states cannot make the shift? What if the $200 bonus is simply not enough? And here's what they said. The White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows said the difference would be made up by the $1,200 stimulus check. So stimulus checks are going to be mailed out. The Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said, and I quote, there are plenty of banks that are willing to extend credit to people. He said, there are plenty of banks that are willing to extend credit to people. So that's what he said. Now I'm about to make a bold prediction. I don't normally do that in my videos, and to be honest, I don't like making predictions, not because I could be wrong, and I'll tell you, I could be wrong for sure. I don't like making predictions not because I could be wrong, but because I don't want to give false hope to any of my subscribers. I want to create these videos with a good conscience, and I want to be able to educate my subscribers with fact-based information. And my goal is to help you prepare for a stronger future. So, you know, when I started this channel, my goal was to provide financial education and to help you plan, which I'm doing. But there's one thing I've learned from all of you. It is that there's a lot of pain out there, there's a lot of suffering out there, but there's also a significant amount of strength out there. And it is your strength that actually keeps me going to make these videos. So honestly, I wouldn't want to give any false hope to any of my subscribers, but I will put my neck on the line right now, and I'm going to make a bold prediction. And you know, I mean, I want to do things with a clear conscience. I want to sleep well at night, but again, I could be wrong, but I'm going to make a bold prediction here. And I want to tell you why I'm making this prediction. 10% of sort of the reason for me making the prediction is because I'm an optimist, I'm a dreamer, and I believe that at the end of the day, the government officials will do a right thing. I don't think Senate Leader Mitch McConnell, I don't think President Trump or Steven Mnuchin or Mark Meadows, you know, want to harm the citizens of our country. I don't think Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer want to harm anyone. I think that they're playing political games, and this political gridlock is going on, and a lot of individuals, more than 20 million individuals, are stuck in between, almost like pawns in a game. But I do believe one day we'll look back at this and we'll come out stronger on the other side. And 90% of the reason I want to make a bold prediction is politically and in the court of public opinion. I think it'll be self-sabotage for them not to extend this in one way, shape or form quickly, not to allow it to lapse. I think a lot of voters are actually in swing states like Florida, like Ohio, like Michigan. And the fact is, at the end of the day, this is a political game. It's like a game of chess. Some of the moves have already been made, even though we can't see them yet. And the idea is to be able to make a proper conclude, to sort of make sense out of all this. Now, the fact is, in this type of situation, I don't think either side wants to sabotage themselves with over 20 million adult unemployed voters. The game simply goes on, and I think, this is what I think. The reality is, when the rules of the game are broken, and right now a lot of rules have been broken and new rules are being made as we go along, the brain can't engage because the brain needs simplicity. The brain doesn't want complexity, and it's hard for us to make sense of all this, which is why it's easy for us to believe that, you know, this side is bad or that side is bad, or those who are unemployed, lazy or whatever. The brain simply needs to make sense of all of this. But one of the reasons I've been successful in my life is I've been able to see what's going on at the surface level and see what's going on sort of beneath the surface. And like I said, politically, this would be sabotage for this to end, especially with voters in swing states like Florida. Florida is a very, very, very important state. Voters in Florida, Michigan, Ohio, there are voters there in swing states. So I believe, and here's my bold prediction as I wrap up this video, I believe there'll be an announcement soon. It could come from the president, it could come from some other government official. I believe there'll be an announcement soon that some version of the $600 a week federal booster will indeed be extended for some period of time. And this whole thing about the 70% $200 will be worked out over time. Now again, I have to warn you, I could be wrong, and I don't normally like to make predictions, but I'm able to see what's going on, and this is what I believe. And I don't normally make predictions, but 10% of me wants it to happen, 90% of me sees the writing on the wall. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you watching. If you did like this video, please click the like button. I would really appreciate you clicking the like button. I would appreciate it if you subscribe and enable notifications so you get instant future updates from my channel, from Ignition Time. I release videos at 2 p.m. East Coast time most days of the week. If you would like to get on my list, if you'd like to get important breaking news alerts, please send a text message with the word ignition or with the word time. Get your phone out, send a text message with the word ignition or with the word time, because the name of the channel is Ignition Time. So either word ignition or time. Send it to 70,000, that's 70000. Please click like, please click subscribe because it really helps me out. Please enable notifications so you get instant updates about this going forward, and we'll see what happens in the next few days. But I have told you what the facts are and how I feel. Thank you so much for watching. We will get through this, and I appreciate you watching. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.